Hello, world, and welcome to the latest Coder Sprint podcast. I believe it's episode 6 um, of the podcast. And today we are joined with Sergio, who was actually my former manager. I've known Sergio for a while now, and yeah, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello world. At least that's how I heard you say at least once. I'm going to go with that. Happy and excited to be here.
Alrighty. So I guess just kicking off with a classic old question. What was your journey into programming like? And yeah, what are some of the highlights that got to where you are now?
Very interesting question. And I'll start quite a long time ago. How did I land in programming? So I've done part of it was like the classic journey. So I have a computer science background, and I finished uni, and then I joined, a company that did software, that produced software. Now, that in itself is a little bit boring. How I chose computer programming is perhaps a little bit more interesting. So, back from where I'm from, Portugal, I think high school or secondary school is pretty much standardized. And so I didn't have any idea. So this was back in late 90s. I didn't have a good idea on what computer science actually meant. So the subjects at school, I did a little bit of MS-DOS, Microsoft Access. I think there was a little bit of Microsoft Access, but that's not really programming. So I was a very good student in high school. I did like maths. I did like physics. I knew that being a computer engineer or software engineer was a good career. I also liked video games. So in my mind, that made sense. Checked all boxes. That's a good, and I'll probably like it. So that's how I landed in uni. I had the grades, so that wasn't a problem. That's how I went there. Now in uni, it was very different because it was like a completely new world for me. I realized that I had, zero knowledge on what programming actually was. I found out that a few people already had played a lot with programming languages when I joined, which for me was like, oh, I'm no longer like maybe very, very good. Maybe I'm just an average student here, which, was eye-opening, let's say. And because degrees in Portugal used to be 5 years, some parts of it were very long. Felt very long. Also because, and now things maybe are different, but it wasn't very tailored to the professional world. A lot of it was, the typical courses that you take, you study for the exam, you pass, and then you forget. So like 20% were very useful. I would say that 80%, 70%, I forget, never used in real life. So when I went out to the professional world, I was not even sure if I wanted to continue to be a software engineer. So that was interesting. Now, it didn't help that my first experience was not the greatest. So
right. So I mean, there's
yeah,
a
go on.
lot to. I mean, so you would first. I mean, I guess the biggest jump in levels is always between university, where you kind of humble yourself a lot more, right?
Yes. Yes.
But did it deter you from that aspect where there are people better than you, but did it deter you in any way?
So it's interesting. So I guess in high school, I was able to be a very good student with little effort.
Mhm.
So I focus on the things that I used to like and still like sports, video games, just being with friends, chilling, without actual, putting the effort. So particularly the first 2 years, it was difficult because it was like, oh, I like the feeling of being the best that I knew, but I wasn't, I guess, prepared to put in the work because I didn't have to before, and all of a sudden I did have to, and I think maybe it's a stereotype, but I think most people in my degree were not. Not very similar to me, I think, or compared to my high school friends, for instance. So it was very more, let's say, the geeky stereotype, if you will. So I think it didn't help as well to make the transition. So it took me, I guess, it took me a while to adapt. There were definitely certain points where either because I really liked the course, or I know a teacher explained really well something, or I was really motivated, where yes, I would, but it was just in spurts, in certain spikes of effort and enthusiasm. It was definitely not a consistent thing for me.
Right. So you weren't like completely sold on the idea of doing programming to start with, essentially.
No. I
Yeah.
guess midway through, I actually thought about. Not seriously, but you have always those thoughts in your mind of dropping and moving to a completely different field.
Right. Yeah. And I guess when you completely finished your degree, then
Mhm.
you mentioned you didn't have the best experience
Yes.
into your
So
first opportunity.
yeah. So the way I more or less started my professional life was, so the degree was 5 years. The final 6 months was like what we call, or what we used to call, an academic internship, which is you work at a company, you earn some money, but you still have to produce like a report, or it's not really a thesis. It's like a detailed report on the work that you've done at the company. The company has a person assigned that will help you and might have, 2 or 3 meetings with teachers at the university. So yeah, that's like, it's only after 4 years and a half that you have that. So here's what happened. So in the first year, I think, of my final year, sorry, in the first 6 months of my final year, so before the internship, I studied abroad. Okay, studied
And
abroad,
where was
came
that?
back. Sorry.
Where was that?
So I studied abroad in the Netherlands,
Oh, cool.
and I really enjoyed. I think that's when my enthusiasm was brought back to, the levels that I really want to, and I guess needed. I think it also helped that I could choose the courses that I wanted to take, because first 3 years you don't, you can't choose,
You
or you
can't.
were
Yeah.
not able to choose back in Portugal. So
Yeah.
the fact that I had the ability to choose, the fact that I met people from all over the world, I think it really helped me. And so I came back, and like 2 weeks after, one would start the internship. And so I think I applied to a few companies, because you had like a special portal in the university website. And okay, I landed in a company that was, I think it was considered good in my hometown. And I think at the time they were trying to attract a lot of interns. And I think that they attracted like 12 or 13, something like that. And I was like, oh, this is great. Fellow interns. There was like 1-2 week induction, so it felt nice, like the feeling of camaraderie.
Camaraderie, I guess. Yeah.
Camaraderie. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And most of their projects were outside of the country, and because I had just come back from abroad, I was like, okay, I was eager to go back. And they even ask you in interview, oh, would you mind, traveling? I'm like, no, please send me as soon as you can, because I was really, into that at the time. And then it turns out that, okay, I find out that I'm assigned a project in Kuwait. Like, sounds awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Now a few days go by or a week goes by, and oh, actually, you're not going to be assigned to a project in Kuwait. You're going to be assigned to a project in France. Okay, closer, but doesn't matter. It seems the customer seemed interesting. Being abroad seemed interesting. Cool. Now a few days go by, and actually, you're not going to France. You're gonna stay here, and yeah, it's a maintenance project. So I guess I guess lack of
Sounds
luck.
like management went wrong in some way,
I
and you
was
just didn't
yeah.
get to.
I
Yeah.
now looking back, it's like they didn't need that many interns,
Mhm.
and I was, I guess, the unlucky one because I got in a project that basically had ended. So I didn't even know how to produce a report on something that I basically did little to no work. Uh, it was difficult because some people who were I saw people next to me working very hard, being very busy, and I was going there and doing almost nothing, and it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? I mean, and you don't want to start your professional career asking people what I'm supposed to do because that sounds not only that sounds bad, but it also means so. Um, I
But at
guess
the same
midway,
time, you'd be an
yeah.
intern though, right? So that should be expected to be asked, to ask for help or what to do, even.
But it's like when you start, you don't really know what you're meant to do or meant. It's like
Okay. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
There, everything is unknown. Uh, Things that maybe are obvious to us now. So I don't know, midway or maybe a little bit after throughout this, they wanted me to investigate something for a potential new project. I was like, okay, cool. That's different. That's gonna be work. I think that didn't move forward. So so basically, the way things ended there were like, okay, I was able to produce a report because I had a good way with words, and I was able to produce a report with vague expressions, and I mean I could more or less know what the work was, but it's just that it wasn't done by me.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then basically what happened was 6 months are ending now. No more ties to uni, right? Because
Mhm.
people in internships usually just pass. It's just higher grade or low grade, but they usually pass. And the company offer contracts to, I guess, most interns, maybe all of them. I don't even know. Now, in my case, because I'd done no work or very little, they're like, okay, look, and I saw that people around me were getting offered the contracts, right? So
Yeah.
it was not like I didn't have the knowledge. And they're like, okay, so this happened. So what we want you to do is you're gonna go to this project in another country, and then we'll see after 3 or 6 months, and then we'll give you a full contract.
So they
Which
wanted to trial you twice,
again,
essentially. Yeah.
and you know, uh, that didn't seem fair to me. Maybe I can be a little bit emotional sometimes, so I was like, no, I don't want that, and then I left.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Not the best first experience at all,
no,
was it?
not the
No,
best, not
not
the
at all.
best.
Yeah. So did you, yeah, I guess from that, then did you continue to stay within the same industry, the same programming, or?
So after that, I tried to move, but things didn't pan out. And I tried to move to like something a little bit adjacent, like more like consulting, whether management consultancy or even IT consultancy. But I know for one reason or another, things that just didn't pan out. I didn't have the experience as well. Um, and And there were some time passed by, and I was like thinking, oh, maybe I should apply abroad, or maybe I should apply here, and then ultimately I'm like, okay, I need to go. I should give this a go first, because I need to work, and maybe I'll have a good experience this time around. So sometime later, I landed a job in a software house in not really software house, software company that did the clinical software, still in my hometown. And that was interesting because that was in Flash and ActionScript, very up-to-date technologies,
It doesn't exist anymore.
as you may know. But it was something that actually I don't remember why, but I had played on my own with Flash, and the Dreamweaver and ActionScript and those ancient technologies. But yeah, and they were doing that. They were growing a lot. I mean, pretty much everyone. So my hometown is not that big. Maybe it'll have like 800K people. I mean, it's not small, but it's also not huge. But if you have an IT company with, I don't know, let's say 600, people will know, and people will know someone that works there.
Right.
So yeah, and I stayed there for 3 years. I also have many stories from that company, and some that today would be unbelievable. But yeah,
It's not
overall,
acceptable.
we can save that for I know, a special episode of stories in the workplace. But overall, I think a very good experience, I would say. It's not like it was the place where I learned the most, but it was, let's say, it gave me good foundations to then, look elsewhere, know how to work within a team, how to, be a little bit resilient when things don't go my way. Yeah, things that you learn in your first jobs.
So I guess in your 3-year stint, previously you already had the skills for the job, or did you have to learn a bit more on top to progress your way into those 3 years?
So if I had to do a lot of learning for the role,
yeah, like you said, you had prior knowledge of Flash and ActionScript anyways, so it was a pretty good match. But did you have to progress your skills further?
Oh,
or...
yes.
Okay.
For different reasons. For instance, while I mean, some bits of Flash, they were just on the very basic, on the surface. That was one. Then things like, let's say, release, deployment process, QA, all the things that are around, not about the programming itself, that I had to learn. And because now I was actually involved in the process, or more involved. So when I remember that one day, I was working, I was already comfortable with Flash, and I knew there were, workarounds, because the process is not as as refined as we have today in modern companies, right? But when someone mentioned versioning, I didn't even know what that was. I was like, okay, what do you mean copying files from one? And to some extent, it was like that back then. It was copying files from local to a server, and then you'd mark that folder as V whatever.
Yeah.
Because in case of Flash, it would also output Swift files. So yeah, it was interesting. But for instance, when I started, I had no idea about that, how that worked. So I had to learn about that.
So at the end of those 3 years, then did you? What made you think, all right, I need to move? What was your goal at the time, or were you just trying to find something?
Sure. So, I mean, after 3 years in a company, you already know your way in and out. In some cases, you already navigated either a few teams or a few technologies. So you're like, okay, you're getting to a point where your learning curve is starting or is already plateaued, right?
Mhm.
And I also was fortunate to move. So I moved the team, and so initially when I joined, it was the ActionScript 2.0. But then I moved to ActionScript to a team that was working on ActionScript 3.0 and a framework called Flex, which to this day I would say that was ahead of its time. It had things that remind me of React, and this was long ago. It allows you to do cross platform development, which was great back then with Adobe Air. So I got to a point where like, okay, this company has also some interesting things, which for the moment shall remain, I don't know, a mystery. I was like, okay, not learning much now, and this technology in particular, so Flex, is quite in demand in the UK. So back then, pretty much all investment banks, so you can think of UBS, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, they're all doing their own products using Flex, which was great, and that gave me I always wanted to work abroad. After having studied abroad, I always wanted to go back. Now, because my initial experience were not great, and I was not able to successfully apply to a job abroad, with little to no experience, I kind of put that into the back burner. But now with 2-3 years under my belt, I was like, okay, maybe it's a good time to start. Just to have the experience. Even if things go awry, I can always go back. It's not a huge problem. You're young. It seems like there's no downside. And that's how I started to apply abroad. So I think UK and mainly UK and Switzerland, where Adobe Flex was in demand at the time.
Right. So obviously, moving abroad is a very tough decision to make. It's not an easy move, but it seems quite natural to you. Is it something you've always wanted to do the whole time?
After having studied abroad, yes, it
Okay,
was.
so
I
it
think it
was
was.
it was the first point where you actually moved abroad that you said, "I
It
want
was
to
my
do this
first
again."
flight. It
Right.
was when I
Okay.
studied abroad.
Yeah.
So at 21, I was 21 when I. But yeah, I think everything was eye opening to me. Not only the fact that I met people from all around the world, which especially back then was impossible in my hometown,
Yeah.
but also the way things were taught at university were very different. It was
Mhm.
way more catered to the real world. So I like that, and that made me curious. That made me ask questions such as, how do things work actually in the Netherlands or in Switzerland and UK? How are the how are big companies working? Um, so yeah, they were like, maybe now I can maybe now I can try to do that again.
Cool. Yeah. And where did you end up going? Which country?
Well, it was the UK, but that was also interesting because I almost didn't come to the UK, and it's one of those what ifs that I think every now and then because things could have turned out so very differently in my life. Um, so I applied to a few companies and I got rejected, like people are, or you know,
And what was the
you apply to.
main
Sorry.
what was the main reasons for the rejection? Was it
Uh,
a country
I mean,
thing or
to be fair, I didn't have. So I worked with Flex, but I didn't have 3 years of Flex. I had like maybe I don't know one and something.
okay.
And if I wanted to apply to, I don't know. I think back then I thought I was, I didn't want to apply to a junior role. I wanted to apply to like a mid role or
Mhm.
mid-level role. But I think the feedback that I got for at least some places was that was too junior, and in banks, the bar tends to be a little bit higher. So, and I was mainly looking at those banks initially, and at some point that I was like, okay, let me broaden the scope, and somehow I landed in a company in Norway that was doing the, I guess, Norwegian version of Spotify, but it was much much smaller. So don't let's not compare it, but let's think it was like audio product, uh, and they were in the, I guess, Scandinavian market and maybe one or two more countries back then. I know that the HQ was in Oslo, and yeah, I applied. I had to do one of those take-home exercises, which I did, which I put my effort. I passed. I have the final interview. I mean, everything looked awesome. I mean, they really liked me, which was unusual, or at least to me it was unusual. Like, okay, we want you to. We're probably gonna make you an offer. Great. They did make an offer. And imagine this was like on a Monday or Tuesday. Like, okay, that sounds great, and I'm prepared to accept, but I want until the end of the week to think about it, just because. Now, at this time, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna move to Norway. I'm already looking at things, prices, where to look for, where I can rent a flat, things like that, right? Because I have an offer and I'm going to accept it. And I think the following day, before going to work, I go to my personal laptop. I think I didn't even have a proper smartphone back then, so I went to check the email on my laptop, and somehow I got an email from a company that I applied like a month before. This was like a small digital agency in the UK, and I started looking at agencies for, I'm not sure why. Maybe because smaller agencies did like work in different industries, and I like that. I like different, know about different industries. Not sure how I landed in that company, and now I applied. But I was like, okay, let me apply. You have a CV ready, you can start spamming the CV all over the place. So they never replied until that day, and they were like, okay, we'd like to interview. I'm like, oh, come on, now you send this email, and I was like, okay, I have an offer in my hand. So I'm like, okay, I already have a. So I told them, look, I already have an offer. So if you really want to move this forward, this is what I want, and we need to take care of this between today or tomorrow. So we had an interview over the phone, I think that afternoon, something like that. So imagine it was already Wednesday. So Wednesday, I have a phone interview. So I didn't meet the person. They just asked me about things, Flex related, Flash related, maybe computer science related. I don't even remember now. But I was like, I knew that I already have one offer. So that anxiety, being nervous about an interview, I'm just gonna go and say whatever comes to my mind. And I was like, I was in the zone. That interview, I was in the zone. And the following day, I get an offer from them.
Wow. Yeah,
Just like that.
yeah, I think the leverage you had from the previous offer,
Yeah,
that's what did it essentially, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because just like this, I ended up in the UK rather than in Norway. And
Right, yeah. I guess the offer must have been a lot better than the offer from Sweden, is it?
Norway.
Norway,
The-
sorry. Yeah.
So that offer was actually very good. Uh,
Okay.
I think in pure terms we're better, but Norway is also a more expensive country, so you could argue. But other things played as a factor. One, I'd much rather be in the UK than in Norway. No, nothing against Norway, just that one is farther from my country, Portugal. I'm not even sure if there was direct flight from my hometown. For instance, winters were going to be a pain for me.
Don't like winters.
Language, maybe not in the in my day-to-day job, but outside I would have to learn Norwegian, I guess, and that would be a pain probably. And I already knew people like myself who had moved to the UK, so
Okay.
either colleagues or friends. So I think UK just made sense. Besides being a bigger country than if you want to move company and so on. And that's how I landed in the UK basically.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, how was the culture difference between the two places? So, the company that you're in Portugal
Yeah.
versus the agency in London, well, in the UK.
Oh, very different, especially back then. I assume now it's a little bit, or they should be a little bit closer. But back then, I mean, I wouldn't want. Let's say, I wouldn't want to work for a Portuguese company
Was
again.
is it too much of a corporate yeah, what was
It's
the
it.
key differences in culture
I find it a
essentially?
little bit bureaucratic
Okay.
and very strict when it comes to processes. So, for
Mhm.
instance, I think back then, I mean, it was a weird schedule, but I think I was supposed to work from 8 to 5:30. It's weird, but that company, insisted that things were like that. Okay, those are working hours, fine. Once you sign, you're on your own. But I was like, okay, 5:30, off I go. It still took me like 1 hour to get home, and if I'm not doing anything and there's no, why should I be staying? But like every now and then there was someone who would, see and say, "Oh, you're a part timer." Those jokes in the office, which are fine if it is among friends, because among friends, I can joke pretty much about anything. But people who don't know you, that or don't know you well, telling you this, I mean, okay. And I think
I
there's the
guess
culture that
I
it
guess that
should look
meant
good.
right,
So you
yeah.
should stay longer just for appearances, not because you actually have work to do.
I
And
see.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm against.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind, working, later, or okay, I stop for an hour now and work, work 1 hour or even more later the evening. But these sort of things are things that annoy me, and if they annoy me back then, they annoy me now. I mean, I'm older, so I get pickier and grumpier with those little things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that to be fair, I think that depends a lot on the industry that the
Hmm.
company is part of
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
It has a much greater influence. Um, but I assume the company size was also quite different as well, right?
Yes, actually, you would expect that maybe the UK, the company size would be bigger, but it
Yeah.
wasn't. The company size, so the company was very young. They just turned two, 2 years old,
Yeah.
and I think we're like 15. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, can only imagine them getting a CV from a guy in Portugal, because okay, if it was again Morgan Stanley or something like that, or JP Morgan, like, fine. But small company getting, maybe it was weird for them. But yeah, it was 15. There was like someone working for iOS. There were 3 Flex developers, few account execs, and CTO and CEO. And yeah, uh, yeah, we moved office, but the very first office was, very very small and cozy. But I have a fond memory. It was very close to Liverpool Street,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
and I think the first place where I lived was also not too far from Liverpool Street, so I walked to work. It was, I
Nice.
don't know, if I was unlucky in my first professional experience, I guess I was very lucky definitely when I joined the UK.
Cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. I guess a vastly different experience than your previous workplaces
Yes,
then.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that from that point onwards, because I like working, I stayed there for 2 years. Um, what happened that made me move? Because that's also an important point. Was Flash was Flash was dead. So we worked
Ah,
on Flex,
okay.
and we had a few projects. Some were mobile, some were desktop, because cross-platform development. But then Apple signals, okay, we want to kill Flash. The whole industry follows suit. I'm like, ugh, what do I do now? Or what do I do in 6 months? Or what do I do next year? And that's when I'm like, okay, I need to learn JS. I need to move to JS or Android. I also thought about moving to Android.
So essentially, you kept up with the news of the technology and saw that it was a risk to continue working on that.
I mean, yes and no. It was not like I'm always on the forefront of latest technologies.
Mhm.
Um, I think you are way more than I am, for instance. But I remember because with Flex we updated the Flex framework every now and then, and Adobe announced, "Oh, we're gonna put this into maintenance mode." I'm like, okay,
Okay.
and that was shortly after Apple announced that they wanted to kill off Flash. So those news combined are like, okay, this might last because then you know that some companies will look after those legacy projects and those legacy technologies, but people are gonna move, banks are gonna move, so it only made sense for me to look. And while at the time I probably wanted to continue there under like an HTML JS role, I think that was impossible for different
Okay.
reasons. And that's
Yeah.
how I landed on the, landed on the company that we both worked on.
Cool. Yeah. I
Yeah.
yeah. Was it but did they also pivot the product in our company as well that we were in? Or were they still using Flex?
So where we worked when I joined, so the role I have zero knowledge about the company. Um, I remember looking for jobs, and I noticed this role where I mentioned, oh, Flex developer with a move to migrate to JS. I'm like, okay, that ticks all the boxes. And financial industry, it's usually a good thing, I would say, not only to have on CV, but processes as in development process tends to be stricter because
Mhm.
repercussions is customers lose money, so you have to be up to speed, which is good for one to learn. And so I joined that team, but there was already a secondary team. So there were like two teams, one that worked on a Flash-based product and one that worked on the HTML-based product. Now the Flash or Flex was at the time much more mature, but HTML wanted to grow and the business wanted that to grow. And I was luckily, fortunately, loaned out to the HTML team. So that allowed me to learn early in my stint at the company, which was
Also,
fortunate for me.
yeah, I guess it kind of worked out because you wanted to move from Flex and you
Yep.
wanted to move specifically
Yep.
in JavaScript, so it
Hmm.
just kind of fell into place. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess they were aware of that, of where you wanted to go to, right?
Yes. I mean, probably it ended up being earlier than I thought. but I didn't mind that. But I think the direction had already been set. At some point, we'll, nix the Flash-based product in favor of HTML.
Yeah.
Um,
Which was a good
we still
call.
have to maintain, support, even create a few features,
Yeah.
but we need to ramp up. So that's where they came to me. Oh, would you like to? I'm like, yeah, definitely. I want to help with that.
And I guess for those others watching, how long did you end up staying in said company?
Oh, that was close to 6 years. Close or no, actually, 6 years. It
Six
was
years.
my longest stint in a company to date.
Yeah. And I guess you've made a lot of movements internally in the company too, just in terms of starting out as a developer and moving from
Um,
there.
yes and no. So no, in terms of teams. So I pretty much
Mhm.
work on the same product throughout my time at said company. Uh, Now, while that's true, I also would say that okay, I started as a Flex developer, moved to JavaScript developer, became senior JavaScript developer, then became team lead, and until I left.
Yeah, that's it, and that's all in the space of 6 years.
Give or
I
take,
mean, how long did it take from you to get from developer to team lead?
I think 3.
3.
Yeah.
That sounds impressive to me. Um, was it a
Uh,
circumstance thing? Was it definitely around your skills, progression? What what do you think made that move possible in a short amount of time?
uh, I think, as always, a little bit of luck, but a conjunction of factors. So, one, I think I have a very supportive line manager or boss, if you will, and probably like a lot of people, I guess I do suffer from imposter syndrome, and but I always mention that like I feel like I'm not the strongest developer, and I always told him that in like one-to-ones, and he's like, I'm not concerned. You're a good developer, and you focus on other things that are very important to the team. Um, I mean, I always thought that if you are, let's say, a senior engineer, you don't have to be, let's say, cut from the same cloth. You can be senior, I think, in different ways. That's not usually how companies see a senior role these days. At least that's how I found. But in my opinion, you can be a very strong, let's say, techie senior developer. But you can also be a senior developer, as in, okay, you look after, you mentor junior folks, or you interact more with other teams. I think there are different ways of being senior. That's
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah. You do get kind of different types of seniority, but they essentially, I think seniority is well, these days it's a question of time and speciality, but
Mhm.
realistically, it's not always like that, right? It's less about time, more about what skills you're actually sharing across the team.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
yeah,
to me, it's what value you bring to the team and to the company, right?
yeah,
And you could see from our team that we have a few senior engineers by the time I left, or a little bit before, and some of them were very different.
hmm
Like you
definitely,
had people who were super technical, not the most, let's say, people person,
yeah,
but you wanted to talk about a technical topic, or you wanted to find a bug, and that's the person to go. And
exactly,
why wouldn't
yeah,
they be a senior, right?
yeah,
I mean, if you have a person that can solve very complicated and very specific problems, to me that's not a junior or a mid-level role. Oh, that's a senior person. But you also had others who took the time to sit next to other teams to understand the problem, try to compromise and come with a solution that will minimize the effort for both. that's also shows certain maturity and a certain seniority level.
Yeah.
So, going
Mm.
back to how I became a team lead, so that gave me a little bit more confidence, and that I think that's when things really clicked for me. I'm like, okay, I can actually bring something to the table, to the team. I can progress quicker if I just bring things to the table. And I actually that's one of the things that I like in the company. So I put in more work even outside of working hours because I wanted to, but I was rewarded for it, and
And that's important as well, right?
that's very important. I mean, if you're not rewarded, and for people who are listening, I mean, rewarded. It can to me it means it can be monetary reward, uh, promotion, mainly those two. I mean, pats in the back are fine at times, but if that's all you get, then I think you are in the wrong place. So if you put in, some of your own dime, which is more and more precious these days, okay, companies should take notice and say, oh, look, this individual is going above.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so I did this, and I was, I felt very confident, and I got on well with the team. I really enjoyed the team, the different iterations of the team, because we'll always get either a graduate, an apprentice. Um, but I think we had very good we had a very good understanding among each other. Um, I think we worked really well. We gel really well in order to try to bring the best dev process. And it is still something that I mention, every now and then, that I think that's where, as a team, I I work the best, or I saw the best, or I saw a team working the best.
I
I mean,
think
maybe there are better individuals here and there, but to me, I think it was there.
I think what I found when I was in your team was being or having the autonomy um, to to be an independent team, to make
Mhm.
decisions,
Yeah.
processes as you like, right? And I think that's part of the reason why it was so put together well, right? It wasn't just follow the company process and that's it.
And yeah, I think it was something that I like, that everybody brought something into a retro.
Yeah.
So I've had sprint retros in multiple companies. Sometimes we just don't follow up with actions, and there's usually one or two people who are more vocal than the others. But I think, I don't know why, again, maybe just a question of habits. um, Everybody will bring something, questions, things, suggestions to improve, I know, process, or what to bring, certain technologies to bring. uh, People bought into the process, and I think that's half of the problem is people buying into it and believing that they're doing it for a better cause.
Yeah.
Um, so my boss, going back, so my boss had an opportunity at a different team to go higher in his career. So a spot opened up to be team leader. And I thought about it. Am I going to be good at it? Am I not going to be good at it? I had a chat with him. It was like, oh, why are you asking? Why haven't you applied already? And I was like, oh, now he's disappointed. But ultimately, I decided to apply. I went through an internal interview process, and ultimately, that's how I ended up being a team lead.
Ooh.
And I enjoyed the role a lot. For 6 months, I was like, I'll wake up earlier, a little bit anxious, just because, I like, I don't want to mess this up. So there was definitely the weight of responsibility, because I think to that time, I think the team was being led well.
Hmm.
So I wanted, okay, at least it needs to be led, in the same, more or less in the same way. Uh, it cannot be noticeable that because I'm now team lead, I know standards are crap, or you know,
So you felt the pressure and the
yeah.
responsibility to
Oh,
maintain
definitely,
that
definitely,
level of quality.
definitely.
Yeah,
Um, so
which
it
is
took me
fair.
like it took me, I want to say, 5 months or 6 months just to get used to it and enjoy the added pressure. From that
Mhm.
point on, I enjoyed it. So I still felt the responsibility, but it was something that it was just part of my day, and I enjoyed it.
And it took you around, let's say, 5 months to kind of
Yeah,
be
yeah.
comfortable with
Just
that.
not to feel anxious when I would wake up, for instance.
Yeah, yeah, that's completely fair. Yeah. I guess what was the biggest difference in transition between senior dev to team lead?
Um, Getting used, and that took longer, I would say. And I'm not even sure whether I was able to fully let go. But you have to be way less selfish. So I still have the, let's say, urges to code and put out some feature or some small fix or something, because I like to code. But sometimes you have to sit back and let others let others make mistakes, and let them, give them room to grow and breathe. And that's something that you have to get used to, because as a developer, you can just sit in a corner, so to speak, and work and output features, and that's it. Which sometimes I like. Um, as a team lead, no, you have to be more aware of others and be able to listen.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I guess firstly you were just responsible for yourself, and then the next stage was actually being responsible for others as well, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and
And I guess you continued that for 3 years then, pretty much, right?
yes,
Before
yes, pretty
leaving.
much 3 years.
Yeah. And so then moving on from that role, what was your next position?
So my next position, you would expect, oh, you move to I don't know. I guess if people were to guess, it would be like either engineering manager, senior. No, I was just a software engineer after that role. And now that's why was that? So company I work on, as well a few others, start moving like team structures. So a team lead role, while it still exists, it's not as common as it used to be. So at least we're sold now on the idea that teams are flat, engineers are fully responsible for roadmap, and they can organize themselves on their own. So you don't need a team lead. Maybe you need a product owner and you need an engineering manager, and that's it. So basically, my role was about to end together, and I had to decide in my mind whether I wanted to become something like an engineering manager or go back to being a software developer. So the reason why I like the technical team lead or team lead role so much was because I was able to do a little bit of both. To have the bit where I had the reports and I went over through appraisals, one-to-ones. I also had chats with the product owner, design about roadmap, senior stakeholders, but I also coded. Now it was like either 0% or 100%. And when faced with that decision, I went with no, I want to code. Now, I didn't want to go back code in, well, our team was sort of going through the motions back then. So maybe I could have moved to a different team, but I didn't I didn't particularly fancy the technology they were working on. So in my mind, I had set my mind to React as
Hmm.
a
Yep.
technology framework to work. So I looked for, so I played a little bit with React on my own and even in a project that we've done as a team. But yeah, that's when I applied to, I decided to apply to other roles.
Cool.
And that's how I became a React developer.
Yeah, that's interesting because prior to that, the only framework-ish technology used prior was just Flex charts. Well, Flex, right? But then after that, you didn't really use any set frameworks, right? It was all
Exactly.
in-house.
The pro that we
Yeah,
worked on was frameworkless,
yeah,
which is great to learn a language like JS or TypeScript. But yeah, you miss out on what's happening, around you.
and it was it like a harder sell to recruiters saying, "Hey, I don't have crazy experience in React, but I know how to do it."
Um, so it wasn't, but I also didn't think it was. I mean, in my mind, people look at my CV and they're like, okay, there's a big company, and it was team lead and a senior developer there. So
Okay. Yeah.
if skills are transferable in some technologies that are, way different. I mean, it was JS and TS, so moving to React, I think a framework makes it easier, at least in some. So yes, I definitely had to revise React hooks,
Yeah.
component lifecycle, things like that for sure. So I had to make, to study a little bit. But I mean, if you already know uh, vanilla JS and TS, I think it definitely helps. I think it would be a harder sell actually going the other way around. Not sure why would you
Yeah.
do that, but it would probably be you'd be asked harder questions if you went the other way around.
Yeah, I guess it was less of a harder sell because of your extensive experience anyways,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing what I found was, I mean, I applied for a role in a company that I thought it would be nice, and it was nice. Um, and at least the company that we both worked on, um, I think, if I recall correctly, maybe it's different these days, but if people thought you were doing, let's say, a senior level job, you'd be promoted at any given time. It wasn't, you wouldn't have to wait until, let's say, appraisal time to, oh, okay, you are now senior. I think, if I recall correctly. Uh, but at this company, it wasn't like that. It was a little bit stricter. But I mean, I negotiated terms, and I can only speak for myself, but I negotiated mainly, okay, this is what I want, money. So when I saw that my role was software engineer, I wasn't too concerned. I mean, that he didn't have the senior tag attached to it, because I thought, okay, they will realize that I already have a lot of experience as soon as I start, and boom, 3 months in, I can get a promotion, maybe even something else attached to it. So it wasn't the case. It was actually harder to get a promotion just because the process was stricter.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of ego there, because I thought, I feel like a senior. Why aren't they giving me the senior label when
Yeah.
I want it? So yeah, but
Which is quite a
ultimately,
yeah, it's quite a
ultimately,
barrier though.
yeah, yeah. So for instance, that company, they made a bigger distinction of what a senior is, like being
Yeah.
able to, I know, talk with other teams. So going above, let's say, team scope. Okay, I think it wasn't, not that I completely agree, but from that point I was like, okay, I'm gonna be involved in more things. Um, at the same time, I don't think it shouldn't be a checkbox exercise. I think there's more to it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, and I stayed there for 3 years.
Yeah. And I guess the question is, where are you now? Are you still a developer? Are you still, um, or did you go back to being a team lead?
So I'm currently a senior front-end engineer at
Yeah.
another company that I just started 3 months ago, and let's say blockchain domain. And yeah, so far so good. Maybe I'll
So
be able
far,
to
so
tell a little
good.
bit more. But yeah, so far enjoying the role, enjoying the freedom that I have. Um, yeah, it's still early in the process, you know. I guess I'm still in the honeymoon phase. I would say this to some friends that if you were to move companies every 6 months, you'll always be happy because you wouldn't find the little things that ultimately annoy you the most. But
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, for first impressions, yeah, couldn't have been better. Now, whether I will go to a team, I guess to a team lead role, it will be difficult just because right now that's not where the industry is heading. It's more flat teams and then engineering manager. Now these things go in cycles, so who knows? Maybe people will go back to having a team lead in a few years. Engineering manager, I don't know.
I guess just for the audience, what is the difference between team lead, engineering manager? You would have think you manage people, so you know
Yes,
what's
so
the difference?
it also depends in a few companies. So a few companies can call team lead to different things, but the role that I'm thinking team lead is that person do a bit of both in terms of coding and deciding, let's say, a technical direction of the
Mhm.
product, as well a little bit of managerial. So having one-to-ones with your reports, talking to stakeholders. Yeah, a little bit of management, but also a little bit of coding and a little bit more decision making than, let's say, regular software developer. Now, when we talk about the engineering manager these days, we talk just about a person that perhaps is a former software engineer, maybe even in the same company, but is now only responsible for. So I was going to say only responsible, but that's not necessarily true. So for one-to-ones, appraisals, also being involved in meetings that maybe not even the development team is, so with stakeholders just to decide on resourcing, staffing. To me, it's more, and this is only my opinion because I think there are people who do the role really well, but it feels more admin and it feels like I have less, let's say, skin in the game. But this is my impression from what I've seen. And I definitely wouldn't want my role right now. I wouldn't want my role to be 100% like that. If I have a little bit of that, that's fine. I think there are, but 100%, yeah, I wouldn't like it.
I guess after experiencing being a manager for quite a while, you're pretty much decided that I want to stick with programming, right? Or is that not the
And
case?
I really enjoyed because I guess I had very good, I had very people working with me.
Mhm.
So they made it easier to manage. I've had also heard not so good stories from, for instance, my wife, who works in the same industry and is an engineering manager now. But I think she's not as fortunate as I was. And I think when you have good people to manage, if you do, let's say if you only need to give good news, oh, you've been doing really well, so you're gonna get promoted or you're gonna get this. It's easy. I
Mhm.
mean, when you have to say, look, you've not been doing so well, so things need to change. Otherwise, X, Y, and Z. That's when things get a little bit more difficult. it's something that you get adjusted, but yeah, and it's not a nice position to be in. Um, just to give another example, so my former line manager, who I thought was doing a good job, um, so there were some layoffs at the company at some point, and I mean, having to communicate that is difficult because as a manager, you kind of have to make people understand, where the company comes from, but you also have to listen and take into account what your reports are saying and what they may be thinking, because if you hear layoffs, you as an individual, not the manager, is like, I may need to apply to another company, because that if if you're the one on the chopping block, you don't want, you already want to have a plan B, C, and D. But the manager needs to understand sort of both parts, and it's a really tough position to be in.
Yeah.
And that's the place that I don't like to be, if I'm
Yeah.
honest.
It sounds like the role is really tested when it comes to delivering bad news, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. When
Not your cup of tea, I guess.
uh, yeah, again, if it's part of my role, and I also do some coding, and also just going back a little bit, I think there are very different types of management that can work.
Mhm.
So even at the company that we both worked, so some team leads didn't necessarily code or coded 10%. I think I did it quite a bit more than that. I think I did closer to 50.
Yeah, I think you did. You were pretty hardcore with programming.
But I think both can work. It's not like mine is the best. But I
Yeah.
felt like to be, especially because I went from a situation where I like colleagues with everybody to then team lead of everybody. Uh,
Yep.
I wanted to prove that, okay, I'm not going to be one that doesn't know code base and doesn't know what things are being done, under the hood, and just be asking for things. So I wanted to be there in the trenches or wherever you you want us to be, you know, being also a developer on top of being a manager and helping out, and making sure that we're heading in the to in the best direction that we could.
Cool. I think we are pretty much reaching the end of the podcast, but I will ask for those developers or budding developers who haven't had the greatest experiences, such as yourself, um, what would you like to say to them, to those that haven't been so lucky to start off with?
So a few things that from a bad experience might come actually a good outcome. Uh, for instance, uh, my very first boss at the company that we both worked, so he was my manager for like, I don't know, 4 months, something like that, and I want to say it was terrible, but let's say it was not that good, to put it mildly.
Right. Yeah.
And I felt there were points where I felt miserable because of the because of that person. Uh, but then I realized that there was more to it. So when I had a different manager, it was like, okay, it was night and day. Things shifted very quickly, and I was able to. So whereas initially I doubted myself, then there was someone who encouraged me and let's say pointed me in the right direction. So that's one. Other is that you learn that you can withstand, a period of, being in a bad situation. When you're put in a bad situation, first reaction is, oh, I won't get out. If for a certain reason you cannot get out immediately, you have to stay there stuck in the mud. Okay, it will stink. Well, literally, figuratively. The first couple of days, but then you adjust and you adapt and you become. I think you become a little bit stronger because of that. Now, it shouldn't be a situation that you want to stay forever, but you look back and think, okay, this was good for me because then I learned how to deal with this. And just like not everything can be perfect, as in good situations end, also bad situations end. So yes, I think you can learn from it, and then that maybe will make you look in the right direction, and so that you can be in a good situation.
Good ending piece right there.
Indeed.
And with that, I will say thank you for joining the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure.
I feel like we probably need another one, but we shall see.
Oh, happy to come back and be. If you want to be more controversial, I'm happy to be.
Cool. That's all for now, everyone. Thanks, everyone.